Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This video is about esophagus, motor disorder, varices, esophagitis and Barrett's esophagus. These are the references for this video. The learning objectives are, at the end of this lecture, the second year MBBS student should be able to explain the etiology, morphology and pathogenesis of motor disorders of the esophagus, esophageal varices, esophagitis and Barrett's esophagus. Keep in mind these clinical problems we may encounter in our clinical settings. First is a 45-year-old male patient with a 3-year history of gastroesophageal reflux present to a gastroenterologist with the chief complaints of increasing heartburn and regurgitation after meals. Another problem is a 55-year-old Caucasian man present to your gastroenterology clinic. He reports that he has had difficulty keeping down both solid and liquid over the last several months. After obtaining a more detailed history, you find that the patient has regurgitated a small amount of undigested food after almost every meal for the last 3 weeks. He also complains of substernal pain even hours after eating small meals. Then the third scenario is a 42-year-old African American man present to the clinic complaining of heartburn 30 minutes after eating many meals. His pain is worst when he lies down after eating. He has been treating himself with baking soda with good results, but he is wondering if some pill could be prescribed instead. So we will explore the possible causes of these clinical scenario and the pathology behind all these in the next couple of minutes. The esophagus develops from the cranial portion of the foregut and recognizable by the 3rd week of the gestation. It is a hollow, distendable muscular tube that extends from the epiglottis and the pharynx to the gastroesophageal junction. The gastroesophageal junction with the lower esophageal sphincter, physiological function of this is to maintain the muscle tone. The primary function of the esophagus is to deliver ingested solid food and fluids to the stomach. The length of the adult esophagus is between 23 to 25 centimeter, while for endoscopy it is considered from the incisor teeth, and from the incisor teeth to the gastroesophageal junction the length is 38 to 43 centimeters and the average is about 40 centimeters. The color, normal color of the mucosa is white to tan. The lymphatic drainage of the esophagus, the upper 1/3 drains into the cervical lymph node, the middle third into the mediastinum, and the lower third into celiac and the gastric lymph node. This understanding of the lymphatic drainage is important as the cancer of this esophagus metastasized through the lymph nodes. So the group of the lymph nodes or lymphatics that is affected is dependent on the site of the lymph node that is involved. The venous drainage is also important to understand because the varices almost invariably develop, the esophageal varices almost invariably develops in the lower third of the esophagus, because the lower third drain into the portal vein via gastric vein, the middle third drains into the azygous system, and while the upper third into the superior vena cava. There is presence of striated and smooth muscle in the upper portion of the esophagus, while the lower portion contains smooth muscle only. The esophagus is fixed superiorly at the cricopharyngeal and inferior pharyngeal constrictor muscle. They together form the upper esophageal sphincter. The esophagus courses inferiorly through the posterior mediastinum, behind the trachea and heart, and exits the thorax through the diaphragm. There is another sphincter present that is composed of only the smooth muscle and the tonic muscular contraction, and at its lower end creates the lower esophageal sphincter. This is a functional sphincter. This is the normal upper GI endoscopic view of the esophagus, and it is showing the transition from the pale pink to tan squamous mucosa of the esophagus to the darker color pink columnar mucosa of the stomach at the gastroesophageal junction, that is marked by this black arrowhead. And the lower esophageal sphincter is a physiological sphincter that is maintained by its normal muscle tone, and when food arrives in there and the lower esophagus is distended, it relaxes. This lower esophageal sphincter relaxes, and restrictive relaxation of the proximal stomach through a vasovagal reflexes with release of vasoactive intestinal peptides from postganglionic peptidergic vagal nerve fibers. A loss of this normal tone allows reflux of acidic contents of the stomach into the lower esophagus that produces the pathology that results in heartburn. An abnormality in the esophageal sphincter can also produce difficulty in swallowing. This difficulty in swallowing is termed as dysphagia, while lesion in the esophageal mucosa may cause pain in swallowing, and pain on swallowing is termed as odynophagia. So remember these two terms, dysphagia and odynophagia. The esophagus is composed of mucosa, submucosa, muscularis and serosa or adventitia. The mucosa is composed of non-keratinizing squamous epithelium that is overlying the lamina propria, and except at the lower end of the esophagus for a distance of about 0.5 to 1.5 centimeter. The basal layer of the epithelium shows some melanocyte, argyrophilic cells and Langerhans cells. The lower 1.5 or 0.5 to 1.5 centimeter of the esophagus shows mucin secreting columnar epithelium that is termed as junctional mucosa. Submucosa is composed of loose connective tissue in which the lymphocyte, plasma cells and eosinophil and mast cells are sprinkled. The mucus producing glands are scattered throughout the submucosa. The muscularis propria is composed of two layers of smooth muscle, the inner circular and outer longitudinal layer. The proximal part of the esophagus contains skeletal muscle fiber from cricopharyngeus muscle. The parasympathetic nerve supply of the vagus is in the form of extrinsic and intrinsic plexus. The outer covering of the esophagus is termed as adventitia. Serosa is present only in the intra-abdominal part of the esophagus, while elsewhere it is covered by the periesophageal adventitial tissue. This photomicrograph is the histological picture of the normal esophagus, that is showing that this is lined by non-keratinizing squamous epithelium on the left, and underlying there is a submucosa in which the lymphoid tissue and submucosal mucus glands are also present. The lymphoid tissue is surrounding a duct in this picture, and on the right there are the there are the muscularis. The predominantly the voluntarily striated muscles initiate swelling, and they are present in the upper esophagus, and they merges and changes to involuntary smooth muscle distally in the lower esophagus. This provide propulsive peristalsis of the food and liquid boluses into the stomach. The disorders of the esophagus can be classified as congenital and acquired lesions. The congenital lesions of the esophagus are agenesis, that is incompatible with life, while the other lesion are congenital stenosis, atresia, fistulae formation, and duplication of the esophagus. Again, the acquired lesions can be divided into two categories: the benign lesions and malignant one. The benign lesions, the summary of the benign lesion is depicted in this picture, and they consist of obstruction of the esophagus, achalasia, esophagitis and related disorders, lacerations, chemical and infectious esophagitis, reflux esophagitis, eosinophilic esophagitis, esophageal varices, Barrett's esophagus, and the malignant lesions are adenocarcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma of the esophagus. The congenital stenosis is the fibrous thickening of the esophageal wall and atrophy of the muscularis propria. The atresias occur 1 in 3500 births and are the most common esophageal congenital anomaly. The atresia occur with fistula, esophageal fistula, in 92% of the cases, and 50% of the cases of atresia are associated with other anomalies. 1/4 of the atresia are associated with other gastrointestinal malformations, and 20% of the atresia have got vectral syndrome, that is composed of vertebral defects, anal atresia, cardiac defect, tracheoesophageal fistula, renal dysplasia and limb abnormalities. The stenosis of the esophagus occur per 50,000 birth and distal esophagus, and it involves distal esophagus and reflect abnormal wall architecture. The atresias and stenosis may involve any site in the JIT. The atresia may be present alone, or more often it is associated with tracheoesophageal fistula. The etiology of tracheoesophageal fistula is unknown, but genetic environmental factors are considered in its pathogenesis and etiology. It can be diagnosed through the ultrasound prenatally, and it presents with polyhydramnios, prominent esophageal pouch, and a small and absent stomach bubble with fluid-filled loops of the bowel. Polyhydramnios is developed because the amniotic fluid cannot reach the stomach. In 85% of the tracheoesophageal fistulae, the upper portion of the esophagus ends in a blind pouch, and the superior end of the lower segment communicate with the trachea. In this type, the upper blind sac soon fills with mucus, which the infant then aspirates, and surgical correction is then done. Another type of the fistula is communication between the proximal esophagus and the trachea. The lower esophagus communicates with the stomach. This type of the atresia is associated with aspiration soon after birth. The H type of the fistula, they communicate between intact esophagus and intact trachea. In some cases, this lesion is first asymptomatic in adulthood, and it presents with repeated pulmonary infections. The esophagus grossly is a cord-like and non-canalized segment of blind pouch at both ends. And clinically, it is important to recognize this condition very early and to correct surgically within 48 hours of the birth of the newborn. It usually presents with regurgitation of every feed, hypersalivation, attack of cough, and cyanosis. The causes of death in this condition are asphyxia, aspiration pneumonia, and fluid and electrolyte imbalance. The formation of the duplication cysts, they replicate the normal anatomy of the affected bowel, and cystic or tubular remnants of the segment of the gut are duplication. These may occur anywhere in the gut but affect the small bowel often, most often in half of the cases, and in esophagus only 15% of the cases are seen. Duplication are usually continuous with this segment of the bowel from which they arise, although ectopic sites may occur. They may form expanding intramural masses which may cause partial or complete bowel obstruction. The type of esophageal obstructions may be physical or functional. The functional type of the obstruction is due to disruption of the coordinated peristalsis, and this disruption of the coordinated peristalsis will result in esophageal dysmotility. The dysmotility of the esophagus results in three patterns, and one is the nutcracker esophagus. That is the functional obstruction of the esophagus by intense, high amplitude, uncoordinated contraction of the inner circular and outer longitudinal smooth muscle. The barium swallow shows normal or nutcracker-like appearance. That means there are narrow and distended regions present within the esophagus on barium swallow, and manometry is required for the diagnosis of this condition. Then diffuse esophageal spasm is also known as corkscrew esophagus on the barium swallow. It is due to repetitive simultaneous contraction of the distal esophageal smooth muscle, and the contractions in these are of normal amplitude, unlike the nutcracker esophagus. The lower esophageal dysfunction is due to high resting pressure or incomplete relaxation, and it may present as an isolated anomaly or a nutcracker esophagus or diffuse esophageal spasm. A diverticulum, true diverticulum, is an outpouching of the wall that contain all layers of the wall, while a false diverticulum is also termed as pseudo-diverticulum, and in this the outpouching does not have any muscular layer. The esophageal diverticula are often result of motor dysfunction. The increased wall stress within the esophagus will result in diverticula. These may be small, such as epiphrenic diverticula, in which are present in epiphrenic region just immediately above the lower esophageal sphincter. The Zenker's diverticulum are located immediately above the upper esophageal sphincter. There is impaired relaxation and spasm of the cricopharyngeus muscle after swelling that results in increased pressure within the distal pharynx that result in Zenker's diverticulum presence. The Zenker's diverticulum is a false diverticulum, and it is an uncommon condition. The men are affected usually above the age of 50, and this diverticula is composed it is of several centimeter in size, but it may be small, and if it is small, it remain asymptomatic. Large diverticula, they accumulate significant amount of the food and may produce a mass effect. Regurgitation of days-old food may occur and result in bad breath, that is termed as halitosis, and aspiration pneumonia. Treatment is through surgical or endoscopic removal. The mid-esophageal diverticula are also termed as traction diverticula, and they often reflect a disturbance in esophageal motor function but may also be due to adhesion. They ordinarily have wide stomas, wide opening, and pouches are usually higher than their orifices. They do not retain food or secretion due to this their morphology, and they are asymptomatic, and complications are rare. The epiphrenic diverticula are located in the distal most 10 cm of the esophagus, usually above the diaphragm. The motor disturbance of the esophagus, such as the achalasia and diffuse esophageal spasm, are found in 2/3 of the patient with this true diverticulum. Abnormalities of the lower esophageal sphincter may also lead to epiphrenic diverticular formation, and when symptomatic, surgery to correct the underlying motor abnormality such as myotomy is required. The strictures cause mechanical obstruction and progressive dysphagia, and this progressive dysphagia begins with the inability to swallow solids. The esophageal Zenker's diverticulum are also known as pulsion diverticulum. These are barium swallow radiographs, and these two views from upper gastrointestinal series, they show the contrast medium is revealing a Zenker's diverticulum in the upper esophagus. The contrast medium also filling the small pouching that is marked with the yellow arrow, and this outpouching is formed through a weak point in the muscular wall, typically between the constrictor muscle and the upper esophagus, or through the muscularis just above the diaphragm. This lesion produces mass effect, interferes with the swallowing, and food is collected in this outpouching and decays over there and produces marked halitosis. Another entity in the esophageal obstruction is benign esophageal stenosis that is caused by the fibrous thickening of the submucosa and associated with the atrophy of the muscularis propria and secondary epithelial damage. They are congenital and acquired. The congenital variety is rare, while the acquired is due to inflammation and scarring that is caused by chronic gastroesophageal reflux, irradiation, and gastric injury. The patient with functional obstruction or benign structure maintain their appetite and weight, while the malignant structures are often associated with weight loss. Another cause of the esophageal obstruction is esophageal mucosal webs. These are uncommon ledge-like protrusions of the mucosa within the lumen, and they are common in females above the age of 40. They are associated with gastroesophageal reflux disease, chronic graft versus host disease, and blistering skin disease. In the upper esophagus, the webs are accompanied by iron deficiency anemia, glossitis, and cheilosis as part of Plummer-Vinson or Patterson-Kelly syndrome. Morphologically, they are usually single and in thickness only about 2 mm, and they occur anywhere in the esophagus. They are semi-circumferential lesions that are composed of fibrovascular connective tissue that is covered by epithelium. They result in partial obstruction, primarily of incompletely chewed food, or and they are also associated with non-progressive dysphagia. The treatment of this condition is through dilatation with large rubber bogies and excision with biopsy, forceps via endoscopy if needed. The Plummer-Vinson syndrome or Patterson-Kelly syndrome is a condition in which these esophageal webs are present. This is a rare disorder that is characterized by a cervical esophageal web, mucosal lesion of the mouth and pharynx, and iron deficiency anemia. It is associated with dysphagia, that is associated with the aspiration of the swallowed food, and 90% of these cases they are common in female. It is associated with carcinoma of the oropharynx and upper esophagus. Another cause of esophageal obstruction is the presence of esophageal ring that are also termed as Schatzki ring. They are similar to the webs, but they are not semi-circumferential, they are circumferential and are thicker, and they include mucosa, submucosa, and occasionally hypertrophic muscularis propria. They are divided into two types. One is termed as A ring. When they are present in the distal esophagus above the gastroesophageal junction and covered by squamous mucosa, they are termed as A ring. When they are located at the squamocolumnar junction of the lower esophagus and they are lined by gastric cardia type of the mucosa on their undersurface, that are termed as B rings. 14% of the cases are diagnosed on barium examination. They remain usually asymptomatic, and they may present as dysphagia due to narrowing of the lumen. The treatment initially is dietary and lifestyle change, and later, if not corrected, it can be dilated with bogies. These are some other studies, barium studies, and these are showing the stricture and Schatzki ring. The left radiograph, both of the left radiograph, they are showing the structure that is present in the lower end of the esophagus, while the right one is showing a Schatzki ring of the lower esophagus, that is the infolding of the muscular wall just above the diaphragm. This is another picture that is clearly demonstrating the presence of the ring in the lower part of the esophagus, that is the Schatzki ring. Now the motor disorders of the esophagus. Automatic coordination of the muscular movement during swallowing is a motor function, and it results in free passage of the food through the esophagus. But if this system fails, it will result in dysphagia. So the hallmark of the motor disorder is dysphagia. These two terms, dysphagia and odynophagia, are important to remember. Dysphagia is simply difficulty in swallowing, and there is an awareness that food is not moving downward, but it is not painful, while pain on the swelling is termed as odynophagia. The causes of these motor disorders can be divided into three categories. The systemic diseases of the skeletal muscle. As we know that skeletal muscles are attached with or are included in the anatomy of the upper esophagus. So pathology such as myasthenia gravis, dermatomyositis, amyloidosis, hypothyroidism, and mixed edema are associated with the motor disorders of the esophagus. Then neurological condition, the condition and such as cerebrovascular accident or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis that affect the nerves to the skeletal or smooth muscle, and finally the peripheral neuropathy that is associated with diabetes or alcoholism is the cause of the motor disorder. Achalasia, that is also termed as cardiospasm, is an inflammatory disease that causes loss of inhibitory neurons in the esophageal myenteric plexus. It is a chronic inflammation that involves mainly T cells in the myenteric plexus. It leads to neuritis and ganglionitis of this myenteric plexus that results in the loss of the ganglion cell and subsequent fibrosis. So this achalasia is the triad of incomplete lower esophageal sphincter relaxation, increased tone of the lower esophageal sphincter, and aperistalsis of the esophagus. The etiology of this condition is unknown, while genetic, viral, and autoimmune factors have been attributed with this condition. The symptoms are dysphagia, difficulty in belching and chest pain, or dinophagia, that is a rare symptom, and this condition is also associated with minor risk for the esophageal cancer, but this minor risk is usually ignored because it is very minimum. Primary achalasia is a rare condition that results from degeneration of the nitric oxide producing neuron that normally induce lower esophageal sphincter relaxation. The degenerative changes in the extraesophageal vagus nerve or the dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus may also present. The cause is unknown and it is rarely familiar. There are two mechanisms. One is the outflow tract mechanism and another is the esophageal pumping mechanism. When these fail, one is if the lower esophageal sphincter fails to relax with swallowing, or there is poor peristalsis in the body of the esophagus, that will result in retention of the food in the esophagus, and it will result in dilatation of the esophagus and hypertrophy of the wall. The mucosa is redundant and has hyperplastic squamous epithelium, as is clear in this gross picture of an open esophagus. The secondary type of achalasia is due to Chagas disease. This Chagas disease is due to Trypanosoma cruzi infection. The Trypanosoma cause destruction of the myenteric plexus, failure of the peristalsis, and esophageal dilatation. The duodenal, colonic, and ureteric myenteric plexus can also be affected in Chagas disease. Diabetic neuropathy, especially the autonomic neuropathy, is also associated with this achalasia. Infiltrative disorders such as malignancy, amyloidosis, and sarcoidosis are also the causes of secondary achalasia. Systemic sclerosis, that is an autoimmune disease, is also an entity that leads to development of achalasia. The achalasia can be seen in the lesion of the dorsal motor nuclei, such as following poliomyelitis. The lower sphincter tone or the lower esophageal sphincter dysfunction is seen in Down syndrome, and it is also associated with All-Groove syndrome or AAA syndrome, that is an autosomal recessive disorder and characterized by achalasia, alacrima, and adrenocorticotropic hormone resistant adrenal insufficiency. The remote herpes simplex virus infection is also a cause of secondary achalasia, and it is due to linkage of the immunoregulatory gene polymorphism to the achalasia. It is also coexistent with the Sjogren syndrome or autoimmune or Hashimoto thyroiditis, and it is considered that it is due to the destruction of the inhibitory esophageal neurons by the immune mediated mechanisms. So this is the summary of the causes of secondary achalasia: the Chagas disease, diabetic autonomic neuropathy, infiltrative disorder, malignancy, amyloidosis, sarcoidosis, systemic sclerosis, lesion of the motor neuron, or such as polio, Down syndrome, All-Grove or AAA syndrome, remote H. simplex virus infection, Sjogren syndrome, and autoimmune thyroiditis. The systemic sclerosis causes fibrosis in many organs and involve the GIT in 80% of the cases. Any segment of the gastrointestinal tract can be affected, but esophagus is frequently affected organ. Often with severely abnormal esophageal muscle function, the lower esophageal sphincter may be so impaired that the lower esophagus and upper stomach are no longer distinctly functionally, and they visualize as a common cavity. Peristalsis may be impaired throughout the esophagus. The morphology of this condition is the fibrosis that is present in the esophageal smooth muscle, especially in the inner muscularis propria. There is a presence of non-specific inflammation also, and small arteries and arterioles show intimal fibrosis, which may contribute to the fibrosis. It is clinically recognized as dysphagia, regurgitation and heartburn, or severe reflux changes. This photomicrograph is the histopathological appearance of the esophagus in scleroderma. On the left there is this is a trichrome stain. On the left there is a squamous epithelium, and beneath this squamous epithelium the trichrome stain is showing that blue collagenous submucosal fibrosis is there. This blue color is due to fibrous tissue, and there are some remaining fascicles of the red appearing muscles beneath or among these blue areas, fibrous area. There are some red muscle tissue also. There is minimal lymphocytic infiltrate. The another group of the diseases of the esophagus is the esophagitis and related disorder. Among one is the laceration. What happens after during retching or vomiting, that there is development of antiperistaltic contractile wave. When this wave is generated, there is reflex relaxation of the gastroesophageal musculature. In the presence of acute alcohol intoxication or other causes that lead to prolonged vomiting, this reflex relaxation of the gastroesophageal musculature is blocked. This blockage actually leads to increased pressure within this area. This pressure may go above more than 300 millimeter of the mercury, that impart forceful reflux of the gastric content to the gastric inlet. Due to increased pressure to the gastric inlet from the gastric content, there is a stretch and tear is developed in the gastroesophageal wall. These are the longitudinal mucosal tears that are present near the gastroesophageal junction, and these are termed as Mallory-Weiss tear. These are roughly linear lacerations, and they are from few millimeter to several centimeter in size and cross the gastroesophageal junction. They also present in the proximal gastric mucosa as the pressure was coming from the stomach, and they are responsible for the 10% of the gastrointestinal bleeding. No need for surgical intervention for these Mallory-Weiss syndrome is necessary, and healing is rapid and complete in these lacerations. While there is another condition that is termed as Boerhaave syndrome, and in this the pressure can be so severe, or there is some other long-term pathology that results in transmural tearing and rupture of the distal esophagus, and this is a less common condition. So when there is a rupture of the distal esophagus and it is transmural, it will result in severe inflammation in that area and result in severe mediastinitis, and there are symptoms and signs that mimic myocardial infarction, that are the chest pain, tachypnea, and shock. This is the contrast enhanced CT scan of the Burhoff syndrome. That is a rare complication of the rupture of the esophagus. Here it is showing a lucency that is marked by this red dot, and this lucency is representing an air leak from the esophageal rupture into the mediastinum. The point of the rupture in the lower esophagus lies just above the gastroesophageal junction. Leakage of the content of the mediastinum of the esophagus, they leak into the mediastinum and lead to infection and inflammation that quickly spreads into the other areas of the chest cavity. Other causes of the laceration are automobile accident and medical instrumentation. The esophageal perforation can also occur especially in children during suctioning or feeding with a nasogastric tube. The hematemesis is composed of two words, the blood and vomiting. So vomiting of the blood is hematemesis, and the causes of hematemesis, the esophageal causes, are laceration, as we have just discussed, Mallory-Weiss syndrome, esophageal perforation, that may be due to cancer or Burhoff syndrome, varices as a result of cirrhosis, esophageal aortic fistula, chemical and pill esophagitis, infectious esophagitis, herpes or candida, benign strictures, vasculitis, reflux esophagitis, eosinophilic esophagitis, esophageal ulcer, Barrett's esophagus, cancer such as adenocarcinoma or squamous cell carcinoma or hiatal hernia. The chemical and infectious esophagitis, the esophagus is lined by squamous epithelium, and this squamous epithelium may be damaged or insulted by infection, irritants, and other causes. The irritants are alcohol, corrosives such as acids or alkalis, excessively hot fluids, and heavy smoking. Corrosives in children, there may be accidental intake of these home detergent and other home chemicals, and in adults the esophagitis due to corrosive is usually associated with suicidal attempt. Then there is another entity, that is pill-induced esophagitis. The medicinal pills, they lodge in the esophagus and dissolve over there, so result in local irritation. There are iatrogenic causes of the insult to this squamous epithelium. These are cytotoxic chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and graft versus host disease. Desquamative skin diseases such as bullous pemphigoid and epidermolysis bullosa are also associated with this esophagitis. Inflammatory bowel disease, the Crohn's disease, is associated with esophagitis. Then infections are also responsible for the development of esophagitis. These are the important or common one are the herpes simplex virus, cytomegalovirus, candidiasis, mucormycosis, and aspergillosis. The candidiasis and other fungal infections are seen in immunocompromised and dead patients. Then the insult will result in the clinical picture. The symptoms are of this esophagitis are odynophagia, hemorrhage, stricture, or perforation. The morphology of the esophagitis depends or varies with the cause. Although there may be dense neutrophilic infiltrates present with the esophagitis, but the chemical esophagitis is associated with absence of the neutrophils and rapid coagulative necrosis of the esophageal wall. The pill-induced esophagitis occur at the site of stricture that impede the passage of the content, and the irradiation will result in damage similar to that seen in other tissues such as the intimal proliferation and luminal narrowing of the submucosal and mural blood vessel. The infection may affect the esophagus as a causative factor, or they complicate any previous lesion that is present over there. The bacteria and fungi are responsible for about 10% of the infectious esophagitis. They invade and cause mucosal necrosis. The candidiasis will result in adherent gray-white pseudomembrane that is composed of densely mated fungal hyphae and inflammatory cells covering the esophageal mucosa. The herpes virus infection of the esophagus will result in typical punched out ulcers. Histologically, these typical punched out ulcers, there will be viral nuclear inclusion in the degenerating multinucleated epithelial cells at the margin of the ulcer. The cytomegalovirus it shows a shallower ulceration, and histologically there are nuclear and cytoplasmic inclusion within the capillary endothelium and stromal cells. This is the gross appearance of the esophagus, that is showing multiple overlapping herpetic grey-brown ulcers in the distal esophagus, and this photomicrograph is showing multinucleated squamous cells that contain herpes simplex, nuclear inclusions. Then endothelial cells are and the granulation tissue fibroblast are infected with the cytomegalovirus infections, and they are represented with the nuclear and cytoplasmic inclusions. In this micrograph, the endothelial cells are showing the nuclear and cytoplasmic inclusions that are present in cytomegalovirus. Now, continuing the morphology of the esophagitis, the graft versus host disease associated esophagitis is similar to those in the skin. There is basal epithelial cell apoptosis, mucosal atrophy, and submucosal fibrosis without significant acute inflammatory cell infiltrate. While the bullous pemphigoid, epidermolysis bullosa, and Crohn's disease are they show the lesion that is similar to the skin. About esophagitis with systemic illness, the dermolytic or dystrophic form of epidermolysis bullosa involves all organs lined by or derived from squamous epithelium, including skin, nail, teeth, and esophagus. The bulli occur episodically and evolve from fluid-filled vesicles to the weeping ulcer, and the symptoms are dysphagia and painful swelling, while the complication is formation of stricture, especially in the upper esophagus. The bullous pemphigoid causes subepithelial bulli in the skin and esophagus without scarring. The other dermatological disorders that are associated with esophagitis include pemphigus vulgaris, dermatitis herpetiformis, Beckett's syndrome, and erythema multiforme. The graft versus host disease in recipients of bone marrow transplant can cause esophageal lesion and dysphagia. Odynophagia and gastroesophageal reflux. This is the gross picture of the esophagus with the herpes simplex virus infection. There are sharp demarcated ulceration that have got a brown red base that is marked with this white arrow, and they are contrasted with the surrounding normal pale or white esophageal squamous mucosa. The ulceration have got a punched out margin, and this is highly suggestive of punch out margin is highly suggestive of herpes simplex virus infection. This is also seen in immunocompromised patients, and odynophagia is a presenting symptom. This is the gross picture of the esophagitis due to Candida species, and the lesion is marked by this yellow arrow, and the lesion is 10 yellow plaque, and that is present in the lower part of the esophagus. There is associated mucosal hyperemia also. The same lesion is also present in upper gastric fundus also, and these Candida species may affect the oral cavity when it is termed as oral thrush, and upper GI, and they tend to remain superficial, but dissemination occasionally occur, local invasion and dissemination occasionally occur in immunocompromised patients. The chemical esophagitis results from ingestion of corrosive agents. The causes are accidental poisoning that occurs in children, and in adults this is attempted suicide. Then contact with medication is also it also results in chemical esophagitis, and also termed as pill esophagitis. Strong alkaline agents such as lye esophagitis is common because these alkalis are odorless and tasteless. Strong acids such as sulfuric or hydrochloric acid are used in cleaning or detergent solutions, and they can also produce chemical esophagitis. The alkaline agent cause liquefactive necrosis with conspicuous inflammation and saponification of the membrane lipids of all layers of the esophagus and stomach, and small vessel thrombosis adds ischemic necrosis to the injury. Strong acids, they produce immediate coagulative necrosis, and the resultant protective eschar limits injury and penetration. About half of the patients who ingest the concentrated hydrochloric or sulfuric acid, they develop severe esophageal injury. The chemical of the drug has got direct effect on the squamous lined mucosa, especially with capsules, and the esophageal dysmotility and cardiac enlargement, which impinges on the stomach, may contribute as a factor. The reflux esophagitis is the most frequent cause of esophagitis, and it is most common outpatient gastrointestinal diagnosis in the United States. The clinical condition is termed as gastroesophageal reflux disease. The transient lower esophageal sphincter relaxation is linked with the pathogenesis of this condition. When there is transient lower esophageal sphincter relaxation is secondary to the gastric distension. This distension will activate the vagal pathway, and through the activation of the vagal pathways there is this transient lower esophageal sphincter relaxation. The abrupt increase in the intra-abdominal pressure, such happens in coughing, straining and bending. There is protection of the mucosa by the alkaline secretion of the submucosal gland. But if these are prolonged and repeated, then it will lead to the damage. The risk factors or associations with the transient lower esophageal sphincter or reflex esophagitis are alcohol and tobacco use, obesity, chocolate, fatty food, estrogen therapy, use of CNS depressant, pregnancy, hiatal hernia, presence of a nasogastric tube, delayed gastric emptying, and increased gastric volume. The mild types of the gastroesophageal reflux disease simply show hyperemia, that is the redness of the mucosa, and mucosal histology is often unremarkable in mild cases. The moderates are characterized by superficial mucosal erosion and influx of eosinophil into the squamous mucosa. There is basal cell hyperplasia and elongation of the lamina propria papillae, and the severe types of the gastroesophageal reflux disease are associated with ulceration of the mucosa. The neutrophilic infiltrate is less frequently seen in the gastroesophageal reflux disease, and it is usually associated with the fungal infection and chemical damage. The complication of the reflex esophagitis is the formation of stricture, as if the ulcer persists and damages the esophageal wall deep to the lamina propria, there is reactive fibrosis that will lead to the narrowing of the esophageal lumen. On the left, there is endoscopic view of the reflex esophagitis. There are multiple erosion within the squamous lined esophagus, a metaplastic zone, and distal gastric mucosa. The island of the metaplastic epithelium within the white squamous mucosa are seen. The red circle is pointing toward the normal mucosa, that is whitish or pinkish white in color, and the yellow is showing the metaplastic epithelium or metaplastic mucosa. While on the right, the histological picture is showing that there are scattered intraepithelial eosinophils and mild basal zone expansion. This photomicrograph is showing the characteristics of this reflex esophagitis or gastroesophageal reflux disease. There is basal hyperplasia, papillae formation, squamous hyperplasia, and inflammation. The prevalence of the reflex esophagitis in the West is about 10 to 20%, while in Asia it is less than 5% only. The older people more than 40 years of age are affected most. The types may be erosive, non-erosive, or it can lead to Barrett's esophagus, which we are going to discuss later. The symptoms of reflux disease are heartburn, dysphagia, and regurgitation of sour tasting gastric content, especially after the meals. There is gastroesophageal reflux disease associated pain that mimics ischemic heart disease pain. The treatment is through proton pump inhibitor to reduce the gastric acidity, and endoscopy is not required for the diagnosis, but it is done to the patients that are refractory to proton pump inhibitors treatment. The endoscopy is more helpful in eosinophilic esophagitis as well as in Barrett's esophagus, strictures, ulceration, and other gastroesophageal reflux complication. The symptoms, presence of symptoms and histological picture is not closely related, as substantial histological abnormalities may be found in those without typical gastroesophageal reflux disease symptoms. Hiatal hernia is another cause of esophageal reflux, and the hiatal hernia is a protrusion of the stomach into the chest through an enlarged diaphragmatic opening. There are three types of the hiatal hernia. One is the sliding hernia, another is paraesophageal, and third one is the mixed type. The sliding is about 85%. The hernia is sliding type of the hernia. in which the enlargement of the diaphragmatic hiatus and laxity of the circumferential connective tissue allows a cap of gastric mucosa to move upward above the diaphragm, as is clear through this picture, and it is usually asymptomatic and commonly associated with gastroesophageal reflux, but it is still not clear that whether the hiatal hernia is the cause of reflux or it is happening following the reflux. Then the paraesophageal hernia is condition that is characterized by when the portion of gastric fundus herniates through the defect in the diaphragmatic connective tissue that defines the esophageal hiatus and lies beside the esophagus. The hernia progressively enlarges and the hiatus grows increasingly wide, which can compress the esophagus, leading to decrease in reflux of gastric content. This is the computed tomography image of hiatal hernia, which is showing a dilated portion of the gastric fundus that is marked by this black dot, and it is sliding through a esophageal hiatus into the lower chest. 9% of the patient with this condition, they have got the symptoms of acid reflux with gastroesophageal reflux disease. The widened hiatus or the hole interferes with the maintenance of the lower esophageal sphincter function, and the patient may have symptoms of heartburn from reflux of the gastric content into the lower esophagus, and there is retrosternal pain that is burning in nature, particularly after eating meal, and this is increased by lying down after a meal. This is the CT scan without contrast enhancement, and this reveal that much of the stomach is present within the left chest cavity, as is evident by this black dot, and this is a complication of hiatal rolling hernia that is also termed as paraesophageal hernia. This accounts for about 10% of the cases of the hernia, and when this paraesophageal hernia occurs, the vascular supply of the stomach becomes compromised and may result in development of ischemia and infarction. The sliding type of the hiatal hernia presents with the heartburn and regurgitation. These symptoms reflect reflux of gastric content into the esophagus, primarily due to incompetence of the lower esophageal sphincter. The symptoms are worse when the subject reclines, as this position facilitates acid reflux. Generally, the sliding hernia do not require surgery and the symptoms are treated medically, while paraesophageal hernia presents with dysphagia, fullness after meal, shortness of the breath, odynophagia, and occasionally bleeding peptic ulcer. The large hernias have got a risk of gastric volvulus and intrathoracic gastric dilatation. It should be corrected surgically even if it is asymptomatic, as we have earlier seen that this may accompany the ischemia of the stomach. So it should be corrected surgically even if it is asymptomatic. Eosinophilic esophagitis is a form of acute eosinophilic dominated esophageal inflammation associated with atopic disease. The conditions that are associated with this disease, eosinophilic esophagitis, are atopic dermatitis, allergic rhinitis, asthma, or modest peripheral eosinophilia. It is common in urban areas and common in white males, but it may affect any age group. The mast cell involvement is considered in pathogenesis of this disease, and infants may also suffer from feeding intolerance. The symptoms of eosinophilic esophagitis are dysphagia or feeling food stinking upon swallowing, which may then relate to specific food stuff. On endoscopy, they present as with concentric mucosal ring that are appearing as stacked circular rings, that is also termed as feline or trachealization of the esophagus. They are like trachea, and it is called feline because it resembles with a stripped tail of the cat. The vertical linear furrows, narrow esophagus stricture, and small white plaque exudate are other features. This disease is patchy, so multiple biopsies should be taken to study this lesion. The epithelium shows hyperplasia, both the papillary and basal layer hyperplasia. There is intercellular edema, increased intraepithelial eosinophils that are more than 15 per high power field, superficial layering of the eosinophil, formation of eosinophilic microabscesses, and prominent degranulation of the eosinophil. The deeper sample exhibit subepithelial fibrosis and eosinophil in the lamina propria. So this is the feline esophagus, and ringed or feline esophagus, the stacked ring appearance, and that is typical of eosinophilic esophagitis, and histologically it is characterized by numerous intraepithelial eosinophils. The clinical picture of the eosinophilic esophagitis: the adult present with dysphagia to solid or food impaction, while food intolerance, vomiting, feeding difficulties, or failure to thrive are seen in younger adults. There should be a personal or family history of atopy, such as asthma, allergic rhinitis, eczema, and atopic dermatitis. Some patients with extensive intraepithelial eosinophilic infiltration may respond to high doses of PPIs, and dietary restriction is applied to prevent exposure to food allergen, and it is often helpful and can be targeted on the basis of the skin patch or immunoglobulin E testing. Alternatively, elimination of cow's milk, eggs, soy, and legumes and wheat from the diet are beneficial. If the dietary treatment fails, topical or systemic corticosteroid and leukotriene inhibitor can be used as a combination therapy. The eosinophilic esophagitis is not associated with risk of Barrett's esophagus. So the treatment modalities that are available for eosinophilic esophagitis are PPIs, proton pump inhibitor, dietary restriction, corticosteroid, and leukotriene inhibitors. This is the comparison of both the reflux esophagitis and the eosinophilic esophagitis. In both the condition, there is presence of eosinophil. The reflux esophagitis is associated with scattered eosinophilic appearance, while the metaplastic epithelium can be seen on endoscopic view. while the eosinophilic esophagitis is showing the characteristic staked ring appearance or feline esophagus and multiple intraepithelial eosinophils in the eosinophilic esophagitis. That is termed as lymphocytic esophagitis. That is a rare condition, and it is characterized by marked esophageal lymphocytosis in the peripapillary zones with rare or absent granulocytes. There is intercellular edema, and patient presents with a variety of clinical symptoms, and no specific underlying etiology is known. Esophageal varices are dilated veins within the lower esophagus. As we have seen in the anatomy of the esophagus, the esophageal varices, they occur exclusively in the lower third of the esophagus because the drainage of the lower third of the esophagus is connected to the portal venous system. These are small, or these can be large varices. The small one rarely bleed, while the large one bleed readily, and they result in severe shock also. The pathogenesis is related with the portal hypertension, as there is impaired blood flow through the portal venous system and the liver. The portal venous pressure increases, and there is development of the collateral channels at the site where the portal and cable system communicates with each another. So there is drainage through the collateral veins, but it is not sufficient enough and result in congestion and dilatation of the subepithelial and submucosal venous plexus within the distal esophagus and proximal stomach. These are termed as varices, and these are prone to rupture and hemorrhage. They are secondary to cirrhosis and schistosomiasis. Now the morphology of the esophageal varices. These are tortuous dilated veins within the mucosa and submucosa of the distal esophagus and proximal stomach. There is mucosal ulceration, necrosis and rupture, and the signs of the earlier rupture also can be seen. These are the venous thrombosis, inflammation and evidence of prior sclerotherapy. On the left, this is the angiogram that is demonstrating the several tortuous esophageal varices, while on the right, this post-mortem specimen of the esophagus is showing collapsed varices, and there are some polypoid areas. These polypoid areas represent the previous site of varicose hemorrhage that have been ligated with bands. The varices are only present in the lower third of the esophagus because this lower third of the esophagus is linked with the portal system through gastric system, and in this gross picture there are prominent purplish dilated veins near the gastroesophageal junction, and these are the source of bleeding, and the bleeding in this area is termed as variceal bleeding. On histology, the esophageal varices show dilated varices beneath the intact squamous mucosa. This is the endoscopic view of the varices, esophageal varices, and it is showing the dilated submucosal vein of the esophageal plexus that is bulging into this lower esophageal lumen. That is marked by this red dot. Now the clinical features of the esophageal varices. 30% of the people with compensated cirrhosis, while 60% of the people with decompensated cirrhosis suffer from this condition. And the various treatment modalities that are available are beta blockers that decreases the portal blood flow, endoscopic variceal ligation, sclerotherapy, that is the injection of the thrombotic agent at the site, and balloon tamponade. The mortality rate is 15 to 20%, and in most of the cases there is a repeat attack within a year. The risk factors for hemorrhage are large or tortuous varices, elevated hepatic venous pressure gradient, previous bleeding, and advanced liver disease. Barrett's esophagus is a complication of chronic gastroesophageal reflux disease, and it is characterized by intestinal metaplasia within the esophageal squamous mucosa and is associated with an increased risk of cancer. It is present in 10% of the individuals with symptomatic gastroesophageal reflux disease, and it is also seen in 2% of the general population. White male is a risk factor for this condition. Male to female ratio is 3:1. It is almost double in smokers, and it is associated with obesity also. It is a common condition between 40 to 60 years of age, and there is increased risk of esophageal adenocarcinoma. The vast majority of the esophageal adenocarcinoma occur in association of the Barrett's esophagus, but all Barrett's esophagus do not develop esophageal tumor. When gene sequencing on the Barrett's esophagus was done, the presence of pathogenic driver mutation in the cancer genes were found, and mutations were more numerous in dysplastic lesions. The pre-invasive neoplastic lesion is associated with prolonged symptoms, longer segment length of involvement, increased patient age, and Caucasian race. Grossly, the Barrett's esophagus is characterized by the presence of tongues of red velvety mucosa that is extending upward from the gastroesophageal junction. The metaplastic mucosa alternate with the residual smooth pale squamous mucosa and interfaces with the light brown columnar gastric mucosa distally. This disease is divided into two types. One is the long segment disease and another is the short segment disease. When the discoloration affecting or the Barrett's esophagus, it is affecting the area more than 3 centimeter, about 3 centimeter or more than 3 centimeter, that is a long segment Barrett's esophagus disease. Or if it is affecting less than 3 centimeter area, it is the short segment disease. The patient with short segment disease may not experience gastroesophageal reflux disease symptom, and they are at low risk of developing dysplasia or carcinoma relative to those with the long segment disease. This is the gross picture of the esophagus. On the left, this is the normal gastroesophageal junction, and on the right, this is the Barrett's esophagus. There are numerous small islands of residual pale squamous mucosa within the hyperemic or velvety Barrett's mucosa. This is the gross picture of Barrett's esophagus that is showing the islands of reddish metaplastic velvety mucosa that is marked by this golden arrow, and that is present in the lower esophagus above the gastroesophageal junction. There are remaining surrounding whitish or grayish white colored squamous mucosa. The chronic gastroesophageal reflux disease with esophageal mucosa injury can lead to metaplasia of the normal esophageal squamous mucosa into gastric type of columnar mucosa, but with the intestinal type goblet cell known as Barrett's esophagus. The diagnosis of the Barrett's esophagus requires the endoscopic evidence of metaplastic columnar mucosa above the gastroesophageal junction. Histologically, it is characterized by intestinal type metaplasia as the replacement of the squamous esophageal epithelium with goblet cell. The goblet cells are diagnostic of Barrett's esophagus and have distinctive mucous vacuole that stain pale blue and impart the shape of a wine goblet to the remaining cytoplasm. The non-goblet columnar cell or gastric type foveolar cell metaplasia can also be present, but it is controversial for the diagnosis of Barrett's esophagus. These are the Barrett's esophagus endoscopic view and showing that the reddish metaplastic mucosa is present that is typical of Barrett's esophagus, along with the islands of the normal pale esophageal squamous mucosa. The Barrett's red velvety appearance is marked by this black arrow. There are two types of disease. One is the short segment Barrett's esophagus and another is the long segment Barrett's esophagus. If it is extending less than 3 cm above the normal squamocolumnar junction, it is short segment Barrett's esophagus. If it is affecting more than 3 cm above the normal squamocolumnar junction, that is the long segment Barrett's esophagus. This is the photomicrograph of the Barrett's esophagus, revealing the histopathological appearance of the gastroesophageal junction in Barrett's esophagus. There is a transition between the esophageal squamous epithelium that is on the left and the Barrett's metaplasia, and these metaplastic cells are containing numerous metaplastic goblet cells or intestinal type of metaplasia that is more marked on the right side of this photomicrograph. This is the photomicrograph of the Barrett's esophagus, and on the right there is a squamous epithelium while on the left there is columnar epithelium. The columnar epithelium is showing the presence of goblet cell, and the goblet cell presence is the intestinal type of metaplasia that is diagnostic of the Barrett's esophagus. The Barrett's esophagus dysplasia can be graded as none, indefinite, low grade or high grade. The features that are present in both the low grade and high grade are atypical mitosis, nuclear hyperchromasia, irregularly clumped chromatin, increased nuclear cytoplasmic ratio, and failure of the epithelial cell to maturate as they migrate to the upper layers of the epithelium. The dysplastic gland display budding, irregular shape, and cellular crowding, while the high-grade dysplasia, they exhibit more severe cytologic and architectural changes than low-grade one. The epithelial cell may invade the lamina propria, and then they are called as intramucosal carcinoma. So these photomicrographs are showing dysplasias in the Barrett's esophagus. On the left, this picture is showing the abrupt transition from metaplasia to low-grade dysplasia. Here, the nuclear hyperchromasia as well as the stratification of the nuclei is remarkable. While on the right, the glands are showing architectural irregularities. There is gland within gland formation, or cribriform pattern is also formed, and these are present in the high grade dysplasia. This photomicrograph is showing the histological features of Barrett's esophagus with dysplasia, and there is a small area of the remaining squamous mucosa present, that is marked by this black arrow. On the right is the area of the high grade metaplasia of the high grade dysplasia of the metaplastic columnar epithelial cells in the Barrett mucosa. These are the crowded and hyperchromatic nuclei. A few remaining goblet cells on the upper surface on the left, and the glandular architecture irregularity, and these glands showing the hyperchromasia of the columnar cell, crowding of the cell. Also the nuclei are basally located. This is marked by this yellow arrow. So these are the low grade dysplasia, as apical orientation is part of the high grade dysplasia. High grade dysplasia has more likelihood to advance to adenocarcinoma than the low grade. The diagnosis of the Barrett's esophagus depends on the endoscopic and biopsy confirmation. The management of this entity is done by surveillance of the patient by periodic endoscopy with biopsy. However, the randomized clinical trial showed that this is not valuable. Potential of dysplasia is uncertain in Barrett's esophagus, particularly the low-grade dysplasias that regress spontaneously, and limited information on the risk of the progression complicate clinical decision. Intramucosal or invasive carcinoma require therapeutic intervention, while multifocal high-grade dysplasia treated as intramucosal carcinoma because significant risk of progression to intramucosal or invasive carcinoma exist. The treatment modalities available for Barrett's esophagus are surgical resection, that is esophagectomy, photodynamic therapy, laser ablation, and endoscopic mucosectomy. Low-grade dysplasia or a single focus of high-grade dysplasia are treated with endoscopy and biopsy at regular intervals.